Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's the Full 40 with Chris and Rob, part of the Stay Tuned Network, brought to you by Nova Insider, and potentially part of something else in the future, but we'll get to that in a future episode. Not yet. We'll get to that in a future episode.
Big teaser.
Yeah, big teaser. Don't know if it's going to come to fruition, so I could have just totally caused a problem there. But that being said, welcome back, everybody. It's Sunday, November 14th. It's in the morning. It's like 10:30 right now. We're not even 36 hours past when we played UCLA on Friday night. But real quick, before we get into it, Rob, what's your drink of choice on this beautiful Sunday morning?
So this is bold. I just put this on camera. I had a decision to make. I was like, look, it's 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. Am I going to do the whiskey? But I got my morning run in. So because I had the run in, I totally justified it to myself. So I have the Woodford Reserve out this morning, complemented by a coffee in this great Salesforce thermos. I feel like Salesforce should pay me for this, but it's a weird combination. It's working for me. I've got the upper, I've got the downer. We're going to see where this leads me by like 1 o'clock this afternoon, but it's a good start to the day and I'm just happy to be here.
Awesome. Love it.
What do you got? What do you got?
I also went the coffee route. And so I've got it from Dunkin' Donuts, and Dunkin', I know you're a growing brand and need some sponsorship. So by all means, feel free to reach out.
It's an up and coming chain.
But I also did mix in a little Frangelico. It's, we're getting into the holidays or getting close to the holidays. I'm Italian, and, little hazelnut liqueur in the morning goes well with the coffee. So that's where I'm at. I have yard work to do. So again, also going to be interesting for me while I'm blowing leaves in a little bit. But let's get into it. We have a lot to cover this week. This was a crazy week, even though it was only week one. We played in the earliest ever non-conference top 5 matchup played on a campus site in college basketball history on Friday night when we played and eventually lost in overtime to UCLA.
I feel like there were a lot of disclaimers in there, but they actually still kind of made sense, and I'll take it. It's still pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rob, where are you at with it? High level here. Let's start high level and then we'll drill down a little bit. Where are you at after the 1-1 week that was?
Yeah. So I think my headline is that I have a couple of feelings. One, I feel generally pretty good. And I feel pretty good because, one, this feels kind of normal. I said this to our friend group. I said this to you the other day, that I was actually just excited to wake up on Saturday morning and be a little bit pissed off about the game. But having that been my focus, which for so long last year, I'll be honest, I struggled to get excited about the season. It was a weird season, obviously with COVID and all that jazz. So it just felt normal. Watched the game with a bunch of fans on Friday night. Like, we had our Slack going. We were talking about it. It was a big matchup for us. And I was just like, yeah, this is back to Villanova basketball. This is back to college basketball. Let's get at it. So from that standpoint, I was pretty jazzed. Obviously, I'm disappointed in the loss. That said, we 100% should have won this game. And I think this showed a little bit about what our floor is, and we'll obviously get into this a little bit more. So I feel net pretty good coming out of this relative to some other early season losses that we've had in years prior. How about yourself?
You and I are in a similar boat there. It's tough because when you lose a game that you should have won, you just sit there and you stew on it for hours on end. And, the next morning and a screaming baby in my face at 7 o'clock in the morning. And all I could think about was the fact that we should have fucking won that game.
We should have won that game.
So that's a frustrating part. But the fact that we played the game, we availed ourselves well. We played against a previous season Final Four team who was legit. There was questions about that when we did our our little talk sesh. We did a Twitter Spaces sesh. There were some questions. Is UCLA legit? UCLA is legit, right? So, and we availed ourselves well. We played good overall. We should have won the game because of those reasons early on in the season. We said it here on the podcast, win or learn, we win. Obviously, it's great. We learned. I think that's a fine result. Obviously, now does put some pressure on it. We do have other ranked opponents coming up that we'll get to either in another podcast or a later part of this podcast. We're going to get to that next week. But you know, that does put some pressure on us. We do have to win some of these ranked out of conference games. So that's the one thing I'll note, but one game doesn't mean like, oh my God, now everything's a must win.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting point. I remember a few years ago, I want to say it was Tom Izzo, one of his years. He just had this gauntlet of a schedule for his team at Michigan State, and they were supposed to be a good team coming in, and they just got absolutely decimated and didn't really recover throughout the whole year, and it kind of threw everything off. And it was very much one of those, well, yeah, I wanted to test the guys, and it was ultimately like a little bit too much of a test. And I do think there will be a little bit of an element of pressure moving forward. That said, I think Jay has shown the ability to get the guys pretty steady and rebound and at least pick up some of those wins that you're supposed to against those ranked teams going forward. So yeah, I'm with you. We'll see. Big week, really exciting matchups for us. We're pretty spoiled. It's like from one great week to another this year in the out of conference schedule.
Yep. But I will say, if we don't take like at least a 2-1 week this week, I'm going to get impatient.
Yeah.
So we got Howard later, and then we earlier this week, and then we have Tennessee followed by UNC or Purdue. We'll get into previews for those games later on, but we got to go 2-1 at the very minimum.
Totally.
So, all right.
Should we talk UCLA?
Yeah, I think we should dive right into there. I mean, obviously the game of the week was Mount St. Mary's, but we should probably probably talk about UCLA first.
Yeah. For all our Mount St. Mary's listeners out there, don't worry. We'll get to it.
All righty. So we have some discussion points to hit. I think first and foremost is that even though I'm disappointed about the lack of a suit game from Jay Wright, it still needs to be said. He looks better in a tracksuit than Mitch Cronin looks in a real suit.
Dude, absolutely. So the team went 1-1 this week. Jay Wright went 2-0 on the tracksuit versus real suit. He had big matchups in both. Mount St. Mary's coach rocked the bow tie, smoked him. And then, yes, Mick Cronin looked like he just hadn't had a suit update since like 2010. He's just rolling in that old 2000s style. And Jay's like, this is 2021. We're going to wear suits. And he looks fucking great. He looks great.
Yeah, you know, like when kids go on college interviews and they wear a suit to their college interview, but it's clearly a dad's hand-me-down suit. That's how Mick Cronin looks in a suit.
You absolutely nailed that, 100%.
Yeah, he looks like, you know, the sleeves are a little long. You know, it just looks ridiculous. You know, he's just not the best looking guy. And, you know, the Mr. Clean look doesn't work for him. I don't know if he can grow hair. He probably should consider it. Unlike Shaka Smart, who probably should have stayed bald, but that's a whole conversation for later in the year. But yeah, I gotta say, Jay pulls it off. And when you can pull it off, you can get away with it.
Mick looked like he was the contrast with Jay made it look like Mick was trying so hard to look good and just didn't read the room. He was like that guy who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to a party Friday night and everybody's there in like t-shirts, jeans, and like whatever. And he shows up in like a fucking, I don't know, cardigan and a little tie. It was just terrible misread. So hat tip to Jay. He is smoking the tracksuit game, is clearly redefining style for the NCAA. Once again, kudos to Jay for reinventing himself.
Love it. All right. Before we get into any discussion on the game, I do have to say, it felt really good to watch fans in the stands in general.
Yes.
Whether it was a big away game with a loud stadium, Pauley Pavilion was packed. It was electric environment in there. Like there was an element where it was like good that UCLA made a comeback for the sense of like watching a game. You felt like the game pressure as opposed to just watching like a no volume squeaks on the court. It was just ridiculous that last year. So this year with no fans in the stands, this year with a lot of fans in the stands, it was awesome.
Yeah.
And so it makes the games feel more relevant, feel more watchable. I feel like you're getting real stuff out of them. So I have to say it was good. And I'll also give a little hat tip to the Nova Nation. I thought the student section, considering it was Mount St. Mary's, was pretty good on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I agree. You could hear them on TV. I don't have a whole lot more to add. I think you nailed this. It's just great seeing and hearing the fans. And yes, the fact that you could hear the student section against Mount St. Mary's is notable in and of itself. Good for them.
So let's get into the UCLA game. We've been talking about how we're going to get into it for like 10 minutes now. My first point on the UCLA game is a good, a bad, and an ugly point. And it has to do with defense and rebounding. The good about the defense is that our top 6 guys have shown the ability to defend all positions on the court, and specifically Eric Dixon, Brandon Slater, and Jermaine Samuels. I thought those guys did a great job on switches. I thought that they looked strong. I thought that they did the best they could. Yeah. Are they going to get beat on a bad switch sometimes? Of course. UCLA had highly talented guys. You have Juzang, you have Jaquez, you have Tiger Campbell. You have all these guys on UCLA's team who are able to break it down. These are high-level, top-end recruits coming out of high school, and they are, getting NBA looks to a certain degree. These are high-level athletes, and of course, they're going to beat you sometimes. But I thought that they held their own very well.
Yeah, no, totally agree for the most part. Again, as we alluded to, we thought we should have won this game. It was generally good, and we'll talk a little bit more about Dixon a little bit later. I think defensively he had he was on an island for a lot of the time as well that he had to deal with, but felt good about that. Felt good about the fact that we were able to force a lot of turnovers, and it seemed like throughout most of the game that UCLA was a little bit rattled, with the exception of Juzang, who just hit some unconscious stretch where he had 6 or 7 made shots in a row, and it was one of those, okay, he's operating at a different level right now. But yeah, I think you're right on this one.
The turnover point, I think, is another point on the good.
Yeah,
this team is going to turn people over this year. We did it against Mount St. Mary's and we did it against UCLA. Like, that's a really, like, Mount St. Mary's, you're like, okay, of course we're going to turn them over. But the fact that we can turn people over and get runouts and get some transition buckets, that's going to be good. That was not a feature on the last couple of years of teams. So the fact that we can turn people over, like, that's key, because we're going to need to get to a point where we're down a few baskets and can turn people over and get on a little bit of a run. And defense into offense was something missing since really the 2018 squad. And I'm really glad to see it back in this year's edition of Villanova basketball. And so I'm hopeful, and I think that will be a consistent point for the rest of the year. And I think that has a lot to do with Slater being in the starting lineup.
Yeah. He's obviously super athletic, and with the bulk this year too, can guard anybody.
The bad.
Let's go.
Still a lot of open shots and a lot of blown covers in transition and coming out of the 1-2-2 press. Look, Rob and I have said it before. We're not going to give you the biggest basketball analysis, but like, UCLA missed open shots in this game, and that was pretty clear. So they hit some hard shots, but they missed some open looks. It kind of washes itself out overall, but there was too many times where we were late on closeouts and 3-pointers, etc. And if a team gets really hot, we're going to have a hard time with that. So that part was not as good. I think that tends to get cleaned up as the year goes on. That's not an uncommon thing to say about a Villanova team earlier in the year, but we're playing some high profile games, so that needs to get cleaned up and pretty quickly.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think I kind of almost blocked it from my mind, so thank you for reminding me. I do feel like we did dodge a number of bullets throughout that game because UCLA just missed some wide open looks that should have made this game tighter earlier on in the second half. So I don't want to say that UCLA deserved to win, because I do think we deserved to win, but that game would have been a lot different towards the end had they hit, even one or two more of those. And that was just, poor switching and poor defense. And they were really wide open looks.
Yeah. But I'll kind of give that, as I said, I'll give that a little bit of a wash. There were some contested shots that looked impossible that they hit in that game. So I'm giving that a little bit of a wash. Our guards are not as good in general on defense as our great teams of yesteryear. And, obviously, we mentioned Slater being able to get his hands in there and cause some turnovers is going to help that a little bit. So good. We're going to need it. The other part is they're not as good as in the post. When we had mismatches in the past, when you think of Arcidiacono, Hart, Brunson, Booth, some of those guys, when they got trapped on a switch and were down low, those guys were beasts down there. Fronting the post everywhere, causing turnovers, preventing the bigs from getting the ball down low. There were warriors in the post. I'm not seeing it from Colin and from Justin as much. It's there, they're trying, but they're just not as effective at all in that regard.
That's a great point. I had totally forgotten about just how much tenacity that both Arch and Brunson used to show down there. It was if they got switched, it really wasn't that much of an advantage, which was wild that they were able to hold their own back in the day. And we 100% do not have that on the defensive end or the offensive end for that matter too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally the ugly, and that's rebounding. We almost got out-rebounded in the Mount St. Mary's game, which is just a joke. But we got absolutely massacred on the boards against UCLA. We got out-rebounded 46-32. That right there is the difference in the game.
That is interesting.
That's right. That's the difference. You even that out even a little bit, and we win that game in regulation. And there's a number of things you could point to. If this happened, if that happened, if the other thing happened, we win in regulation. So those are the good, the bad, and the ugly on the defense and rebounding front. Had to hit those points just because, look, this team is offensively gifted. We can score. I'm not worried about this team offensively. I am worried about this team defensively. And so we're going to hear us talk on this podcast throughout the year about defense. It's not sexy. It's not whatever, but that's going to be the difference between this team being a Sweet 16, Elite 8 type team and this team being a Final Four national championship contender. We're ranked 42 in KenPom on adjusted defensive efficiency right now. That number needs to be top 20, has to be top 20 if we're going to win the title this year, period. Has to get there. So we're going to be harping on that all season long on the podcast.
I love it. All right. Should we hit our next big topic?
We got to hit the next big topic.
Oh, God.
Jay's rotation. God. And this is already something that I could see being an early theme. I hope it doesn't become an early theme. We had a debate. We almost put it in the narrative section. But because of the Mount St. Mary's game, we left it in the UCLA game recap section. But if it comes and rears its ugly head next week, when we play Tennessee and Purdue or UNC, it's going on the narrative list. And that is Jay's rotation fucking sucked.
Terrible. Absolutely
against
terrible.
UCLA. 11:30 p.m. Eastern time game. We know that they went out early. Shaq told us that they were going out on Wednesday. They got there early, so they had a little bit of time to get adjusted. Fine. Still, 11:30 Eastern time game. The game was going to end 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. These are guys who go to bed early. They wake up early.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're playing that game totally out of sorts in terms of time of the game. And then you shorten the rotation to 6.5 guys, right? Caleb played starters minutes off the bench. Chris Arcidiacono, which is a conversation in and of itself, played the 7th man role and played 7 to 10
7,
minutes.
It barely even counts.
Right. So 6.5 guys, that's where we're going with that, is an absolute farce. And I realize Brian Antoine is injured. So that option is out, right?
Fine.
Can't do anything about that. Still, in the Mount St. Mary's game, Jordan Longino was everywhere. He looked good. Trey Patterson has been with the program for a year. And Nana Njoku, in a game where you're getting absolutely slaughtered on the boards, could have helped us out a little bit on that front. So the fact that he's not playing it, I get it. we're going to get into the narrative section about the freshmen and bringing them along and that in the Jay Wright era. But the fact that he did not go to those guys at all, given the circumstances and the environment and how much effort these guys are expending, we lost that 10-point lead in the second half because these guys were fucking gassed. And that's on Jay. Period.
Absolutely. Preach. I love it. And look, people will be like, oh, how can you question Jay? He's, 2-time national champion. He's a Hall of Famer. Like, he knows what he's doing. Yeah, of course he knows what he's doing. There is still validity in criticizing this. Like, this just didn't make any sense to me. The pure basic idea of, hey, we're effectively running, forget 6.5, we're effectively running 6 men, and one of them, at least one of them, is not being very effective. There's got to be some value in at least having some different looks and some different personnel on the floor, especially when things are stagnating in the second half. Now, we all know Jay's like always tightening up his rotation, and you don't want to be introducing Jordan Longino, with 10 minutes left in the game to be like, oh, I need a new look. No, you want to be bringing him along and having him sprinkled throughout the game as well, too. So when you're late in the second half and you need that different look just to throw UCLA something different, you have somebody that you can fall back on when things aren't working. Like, there's value in having that change there. There's value in getting some fresh legs. This one just absolutely baffled me. I don't want to hate too much, but like, the fact that Chris Arch is there as like the 7th man, I don't know. I'm really struggling with that one. I want to see these guys come along. I want to see some different looks, because otherwise you're just running the same 6 guys on the floor for the entire game. The UCLA or whoever we're playing is absolutely going to pick up on it. If they start to shut things down, it doesn't seem like we're doing a whole lot different, and we just keep trying the same thing, which I'm not a big fan of.
I'm still on this topic. I mean, look, you said what you have to say about Chris Arch, and I won't go more than that. He gave us great minutes at the end of last year, and there's no hate on Chris Arch. My hate is on Jay playing him as the 7th man. And not Jordan Longino, who could have used the opportunity to grow. And just to be clear, there was never an intention by Jay Wright to play the freshman, and he just forgot. No, if you looked at the bench, which the camera panned to the bench several times, if you looked at the bench, you had Arch and you had Caleb at the front end of the bench. Then all the assistant coaches, and then the freshmen were buried at the end of the bench. So it wasn't like, oh, he just forgot and got into the game and got, swept up in the intensity. No, those guys weren't moving from their seats. There was never an intention. It looked like it was pre-discussed, predetermined. Guys, you're not playing. You got to watch this before you can, you got to watch this for years before you can play. And it's like, I get it, but like, man, Longino for 10 minutes in the first half or 8 minutes in the first half could have been all the difference in the game, even if he doesn't show up in the second half box score.
Yeah.
So
it was like a blessing that he's like, yeah, I guess you guys can dress today. Sure. If you want to put on your warm-ups in Jersey, like, feel free. You're not going to use it.
Ha ha. Like ridiculous.
Ha ha. Put on your jersey, Jordan.
Yeah. And then
nuts.
We got a good mailbag question is who should be the 7th man? And when Brian Antoine comes back, the answer for me as to who should be the 7th man is Caleb Daniels.
Yes.
So look, he's the 6th man. He's kind of folded into the 6th starter role. At the end of last year, there was a lot of discussion around Caleb Daniels, and I was willing to write it off. He had developed myocarditis from long-term COVID. When he got diagnosed from COVID back in January, threw his entire game off. Early season Caleb last year was excellent, and I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, especially when you consider he was the star player. He was a star player at Tulane. Now, Tulane's Tulane, but they played in the American, which had Cincinnati and Houston and all those, Wichita State and all those teams on it, UConn. And he was like a 16-point scorer in that league. That's not a bad player at all. So I was willing to give Caleb the benefit of the doubt. In this game, the announcers were giving him some praise, actually, like Billis was giving him some praise throughout the game. I wasn't there. He made some good defensive plays. He was trying. There's no debate on his effort. he made some really bad decisions down the stretch.
Yeah.
Tried to play iso ball at points and like took ill-advised shots, trying to throw like heroic layups up at, on contested shots. It was just not the right decision in a time when we were like starting to see the lead slip away. Moore obviously had to be buried on the bench because of foul trouble, but all of that was terrible. And Caleb Daniels cannot be making those mistakes and be the sixth guy.
Yeah.
If he is, he has to make shots. Like period. He has to be a big offensive or defensive contributor in a meaningful manner. And he did neither. He did none of those things to earn 6 starter minutes. So when Antoine comes back, I want Antoine, at least as of right now, I want Antoine in the 6th starter role and Caleb being the 7th guy, or see where Longino's at, see where Nana's at, see where Patterson's at. So, I mean, the bench was an issue, and Chris Arcidiacono gave us very little. And Caleb was a net negative at the exact wrong time when he didn't need to be. And I don't want to hate on him, but he can't be making bad decisions.
I think that's the issue, and I very much agree with what you said. Jay obviously has historically liked for the 6th man to be a high energy guy who's going to bring something different and kind of lift up the team. I don't think we're getting that from Caleb right now. If there's one thing you can say about Brian Antoine in his limited appearances on the court with the team, is that he brings a fire and an energy. The dude just literally bounces around the court, and is clearly going to be eager to continue to show the growth that he showed at the end of last year and show that he can contribute. So I agree. The 6th man has got to be Brian Antoine, because he can play a number of different roles as well too, which is pretty exciting. And just because of the poor decision making is the one big indictment I have on Caleb. Like, look, you're going to miss shots. That's going to happen. Jay's always had this philosophy of you take the open looks. Sometimes they fall, sometimes they don't. But when you're making the poor decisions, when you're turning the ball over, when you're sloppy, that to me just says, okay, we've got to take a step back, and you should definitely not be that first guy who's coming off the bench.
Yep. Can't disagree at all.
All right. Should we move it along?
Yeah, let's do it on. Let's end on a positive note on the UCLA recap. And the positive note is Eric Dixon.
Woo! Woo! Let's go.
Yeah. Love it.
I'm jacked up about Eric Dixon. This guy, look, if you go back a year and a half from when, give or take, when Eric Dixon committed, I was excited. I was like, look, this guy can shoot inside. He's got a big body. He's another guy outside in the mold of Omari Spellman. Obviously stretching. He wasn't a 5-star recruit, whatever. But we talked about the potential. Last year, a little bit of controversy around Dixon in that he wasn't quite game fit. Obviously, really didn't see the court for all intents and purposes. This year needed to play a big role. Didn't see a ton out of him from in the Mount St. Mary's game, because we also really didn't need him to do that much. But I was really impressed with what he showed in the UCLA game. He played with confidence. He showed a variety of moves around the hoop. He was pretty nimble with his feet. He was able to finish in the paint. He was able to step back, hit like a nice little fadeaway jump shot. I don't know that I would have chosen that as his particular shot when he hit it, but he made it, so I can't complain too much. And then, look, defensively, he had a real big challenge. He was more or less put on an island the entire game and had to play defense at the top of the key against Tiger Campbell, against some of the other guys where they kept getting switched onto. And I thought earlier on in the game, he did a pretty good job of it. You could tell as the game went on, he was clearly getting tired and just couldn't keep up with Tiger Campbell, which no shocker
Colin
there.
Gillespie couldn't keep up with Tiger Campbell.
And it's all right. Yeah, he's getting blown by at the end of the game. I'm not going to fault him for it all that much, but I loved what I saw. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, perhaps on the second part of the podcast. This is a big week for him. We're going to learn a lot about Eric Dixon this week.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would add is that Dixon needs to make people a little bit uncomfortable on the offensive end to start to get matchup advantage. So I'd like to see him do is get a little bit spread out. I want to see Jay invert the offense a little bit. When Justin Moore backs people down into the post, and he's better at that than Gillespie because he's stronger body. When those guys back people down into the post, I want to see Dixon roll out to the 3-point line and look to catch a jumper. That's what Omari did in 2018.
Yeah.
Eric Dixon has that shot in his bag.
He absolutely does.
Yeah.
100%.
And if he can do that, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the defense and that on the opposing team's defense, which will lead to good defense and offense for us overall. Yeah. That is the next level, and he needs to make sure he does a good job feeling that out. But he grabbed a bunch of boards in a game that we got absolutely massacred on the boards. And he scored like, I don't know, 10 plus points in the game. And definitely was a revelation, made a lot of hustle plays, got on the floor. And as you said, guarded every position on the court. I really liked what I saw out of Eric Dixon. And if that progression continues, this is a team that can be really good at the end of the year. Yeah. So I want to end on that high note. If there was one thing that I took away from that game that said this is a top 5 team, this being Villanova, it was that. It was the development of Dixon in that game as it progressed.
100%.
All right, let's transition a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Mount St. Mary's. You brought up a good point, which was that Dixon was quiet. So I thought, okay, maybe we're going to have to cover for Dixon in the UCLA game. Didn't need to, but he was quiet. But I thought you brought up a good point. He was allowed to be quiet in Mount St. Mary's because the other 4 guys were on God mode for that entire game.
Yeah.
And specifically, that was Slater, who was every bit of a revelation. And I think we haven't talked enough about him on this podcast, but we'll get to him. I feel like he's going to get a lot of opportunities to get talked about in this podcast going forward. And then Justin Moore, who was absolutely electric. So both of them looked really good. And then I thought the freshmen, who we talked a lot about earlier, not playing, when they played, looked good. And specifically, I wanted to call out Longino and I wanted to call out Nana. Longino was absolutely everywhere in the Mount St. Mary's game. And Nana, when he came in at the end, he was enormous. He was like by far the biggest guy out there. He looked like a man amongst boys in terms of what he was able to do on a rebounding front. So I loved what I saw out of both of those guys.
Yeah, I think our two big men definitely have some lower body strength, I'll say, is I think one way to put it. They're going to be hard to move down low.
Yeah, absolutely. One quick point on Mount St. Mary's. People on Twitter, can you stop calling them MSM? Please, for the love of God, stop calling it MSM. Look, I'm on Twitter. A lot of politics talk on Twitter. When I see MSM, I hear...
Is there politics talk on Twitter?
I see mainstream media, and I have like a little bit of a conniption when I see MSM. So for the rest of the year, can we just all agree as a Villanova fan base that when we refer to that game, we refer to it as the Mount or Mount St. Mary's or just the first game of the season? If you don't even want to bring it up, please stop calling them MSM. I'm seeing it. I'm getting like the shakes as I see it. We got to stop that.
Ridiculous.
All righty. That's our games recap from
that was a lot. I will say though, going back to the point I made earlier, it feels so good to just be like talking about a game for that long, and it feels regular, and being like, I'm that excited about the team. I'm that excited about the season. We had something fun to react to. It wasn't a win that we wanted, or wasn't obviously a loss that we wanted, but like, we'll take it. We're here. We'll have some fun with it.
Yeah. All right. Getting into narratives. Oh shit. I just remembered something, Rob. We didn't talk at all about the refereeing in the UCLA game.
It was interesting. I will say, so it was funny, even just like seeing our friends and talk about it. I haven't seen a game refereed like that probably since I played like pickup outside of your apartment, outside near Grand Central, like 5 years ago, because there were just no fouls called.
None.
It was like slap in the face, slap on the arm, little hip check, like none of that matters. There was absolutely nothing called. It was a totally different type of game that you had to be in. And from a player standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, you saw Jay on the sidelines going nuts. I know my wife and I were sitting there being like, the hell is that? Like, what are we watching? Like, did these guys get a different set of rules to play by? It just seemed really strange to watch. But it was pretty consistent on both sides of the ball for the most part.
Yeah, someone said to me, there was a bunch of people on Twitter. So I put on Twitter that win or lose, this game is not on the referees.
Yeah.
And people didn't like that. I got ratioed on Twitter. And it was one of the first ratios that I've gotten. And
you got a 4-to-1 ratio, just literally 4 and then 1. That was it.
Yeah.
5 interactions. Yeah.
Yeah. I got crushed by saying that. Someone was like, well, in a tight game, yeah, definitely. I would say, if one more point would have won this game, then it gets a bullshit.
Yeah,
Get out of here.
Sure,
Get out of here. Like, that's every game then. Every fucking game that's close is on the referees.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous statement.
Give me a break. And someone was like, I hate this. Like, this argument is to excuse bad refereeing. I'm like, I'm not excusing bad refereeing. Okay. I'm just saying that it didn't impact the outcome. It didn't. Yeah. Some people were like, oh, UCLA got bullshit calls down the stretch or whatever.
No.
I don't know. I'm sorry. If I was a UCLA fan, clearly the UCLA fans in the audience felt like they were getting jobbed by the refs. So like there was a lot of conversation being like, ref, you suck. I heard that a ton. So like, I don't know. I think both teams got equally bad whistles and equally good whistles by the referees. I'm going to have a hard time when we have a 10-point lead with 10 minutes left in that game, putting any blame on the referees.
No. And I think part of it is too, as a player, you've got to adjust to it, right? And if you see in the first 5-10 minutes of the game, how the game is going to be called. And because it's being called in a somewhat consistent manner across both sides of the ball, you adapt and you start to play this different game. Like, don't be expecting the refs to change their behavior. Like, they're probably going to continue to give you what they gave you in the first 10 minutes. But I'm with you all the way. The refs didn't decide this game. We got tired. Our offense stagnated. I remember, there's one possession at the end of the game. Fucking Jermaine got the ball. I don't know, it's like 20 seconds left in the shot clock. Just stood there, did a little step, just like bobbed his head a little bit and then just put up a contested jumper. I was like, I don't know what the fuck that was. But that was pretty like representative of our offense throughout the end of the game, which that's how you lose.
Yeah, totally agree. Someone was like, oh, Moore got crushed on that last drive to the hoop. No refs ever call that. Yeah. They never call.
The only refereeing thing that really impacted the game was Moore's second foul, which was a terrible call, relegated him to the bench, and then he picked up his third. That one very much impacted us. But like, you're gonna get some of those bad calls like throughout the game. He should have been actually more aware on his third foul that he had to. He put himself in a very bad position there. So that's
totally couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. All right. All right. Now we're going on to some narratives around early narratives around the team.
Mm-hmm.
One narrative kind of came up before. What's going on with Jay?
So let me take this one. So we talked about the rotation, obviously. This has been a thing for years. We talk about it every single year on the podcast. Jay plays a short bench. Jay is known to bring along his freshmen slowly. His defense is complicated. I get that. My challenge to Jay is why? Why is this an issue year in and year out that we struggle to get freshmen in the game? While your defense may be complicated, I think Jay needs to do a better job or change how it's actually taught. Like, presumably, like, you've had this switching concept for a number of years. You know that freshmen struggle to pick it up. Something should then be changing in terms of how we teach it so that it allows us to get our freshmen on the court earlier, or we need to change what we're willing to do and see in those early season games so they can come along a little bit later. And folks listening to the podcast, you may hear some banging in the background. My neighbor is clearly doing construction on the other side of the wall, so you're just going to have to deal with that.
I've got
like a hammer like in my head at this point. So
is Nicole like doing some construction on your apartment?
What's going on? I don't know. Clearly somebody's just having. It's like Sunday morning, like we got to do some workout. I guess the equivalent, like, I don't have a lawn to mow, so I'm like hang some pictures, but whatever. Here we are. So anyway, I think that's a little bit of a challenge and an indictment on Jay. Like, you should change your teaching methods based on what your teams are struggling with. And that I think needs to change.
It's hard to disagree on a lot of fronts. Look, there's some things where I'm not going to assail and fault a guy who's won 2 national championships as a Hall of Famer. But at the same time, Jay has specifically said, we need to be deep if we're going to go far this year. He has said that. He has articulated that to the media on multiple occasions. He goes, we need to find depth if we are going to be the best possible team and go far in March and win the Big East and all this other stuff that they're looking to accomplish. We need to find depth. You find depth through playing time early on.
Yeah.
Yes, the guys will make mistakes. Let them make the mistake and then berate them after the fact when you watch the video. Like, that's how you do it. Right? I get it. He's probably sitting there being like, I want these guys to see what a real environment's like. I want them to see. I want them to feel that. I get that to a certain degree. I'm not telling you to play Longino or Nana or Patterson 20 minutes in this game. It's not what I'm saying. 5-10 minutes of burn would be enough just to spell the guys who you need in the second half, late in the games, to win you the games. So I struggle with it. It's an early narrative. I hope it goes away. He played a deep rotation against Mount St. Mary's. I'm sure he'll be deep against Howard. Not interested in the rotation in Howard. I'm interested in the rotation when we play Tennessee and Purdue or UNC later on in the week, because Jay's got to get these guys in these games to develop. And the one thing is, people might say like, oh, well, if we would have won the game against UCLA, you wouldn't be saying this. I probably would still be saying it.
No, we'd absolutely be saying it.
I probably would still be
100%.
saying it. But guess what? My attitude is also, if you're going to lose the game anyway, you might as well lose it and play other guys, right? So I struggle with that because, obviously if you pick up a win, does it take some of the edge off? Yeah, it definitely takes some of the edge off. But this is something that's going to be watched all season long. Jay said we need to be deep. If Jay's going to say we need to be deep, then he acknowledges that he needs to fix it, and not playing them a single minute and relegating them to a position on the bench behind the assistant coaches is not a sign that he has an intent of actually doing it. So he's on the lookout. He's been warned.
Jay's been warned. Jay, you're on blast. The full 40 is coming for you.
That said, again, let's be positive. Our starting 5 is fucking good. Like,
they're good. Yeah.
Really, really good. And we seem to be early on developing one of those things, like anyone on the starting 5 can kill you on a given night. And that's a good sign. When we played the 18 team, they had 6 guys who could kill you on any given night. And so that's a way we can win, and we can win a title on the strength of that. But the starting 5 is definitely really good. Gillespie can pour it on a given night. Samuels was the game high scorer against UCLA. Moore had 27 against Mount St. Mary's, and even with foul trouble, got into double digits against UCLA. And Slater, I think, had double digits in both games. So if you're going to have 4 guys who are averaging over 10, and then you also add Dixon, who seemed to be able to handle a high level matchup quite well, that bodes well for this team going forward into the year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I felt after watching this game that our floor was much higher than it was in my mind coming into this. And that's really just attributed to that starting 5. They showed what they can do. They can hang with anybody. But obviously, referring back to our previous point on the rotation, when you have Justin pick up a 3rd foul or whoever it was, and we start getting into that bench, if that bench isn't developed and comfortable, things go away and the team's floor drops pretty quickly. So we'll keep an eye on it, obviously, but you know that with the starting 5 on the floor, you've got to feel good matching up against anybody in the country.
All right, this pod is going long, so I vote that we split this into 2, and I think we do awards, and then so we'll do this is gonna be a 2-part pod, everybody.
2 parts.
2 parts. Part B may come out pretty quickly after part A, but we're gonna do a 2-part pod. Let's do awards and wrap this one up.
All right. Boom. All right. Should we start with the Shaq Fit man play of the week?
Yep.
I think for me, this one's going to go to Samuels had a dunk, kind of skied for it. Can't remember at what point it was during the UCLA game. Obviously, if we would have won, I think it would have been even more so my go-to, but I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, you're talking about the one he caught a lane on the baseline
Yeah.
and took it right to the rack.
Yeah.
Two-hand flush. Yeah, that was pretty good. Samuels gets a lot of these Shaq Fit Man plays of the week and will probably continue to do so. Slater's going to give him some competition. I am going to go with Nana Njoku in the Mount St. Mary's game with a full palm block at the end of that game.
At the end, the very end.
I want to hand one to the freshman. I want to give the freshman. We've been talking a lot about how we want to see more freshmen. Let's put our money where our mouth is. I'm going to put that in there. And then the Alpha Dog, the ARF Alpha Dog of the Week award, our first one of the season. To me, it's Moore. To me, Justin Moore was the alpha dog this week. 27 against Mount St. Mary's, even with foul trouble, double digits against UCLA. And Jay Billis kept referring to him as our best player, despite Colin and Samuels being on the team for like a million years. And it's hard to debate it after 1 week. So for me, he's my alpha dog of the week.
I like it. So I actually had written down, I wanted to give it to Dixon, but I feel like that's actually stretching the definition of the award. Dixon, I was just excited about his performance because he definitely played above what I expected him to do. That isn't the definition of an alpha dog, ARF. And therefore, I kind of like your pick of Moore. So I want to give a hat tip to Eric Dixon for his effort this week. Hopefully he does earn an alpha dog, but I like Justin Moore for this call. I'm going to support you on it.
I like it. And then the final award, the Pass the Fucking Ball award of the week. And I think to me, this one's pretty clear. I think it's Caleb Daniels. We talked about the decision-making against UCLA, and I think that was it. I think he earned, unfortunately, this award in the last 10 minutes of gameplay and in overtime against UCLA. He earned that Pass the Fucking Ball award of the week. I feel bad. We've said it before. Caleb's like a really nice guy. Great guy. But unfortunately, he's getting my Pass the Fucking Ball award of the week.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think Chris Archidiakono gets an honorable mention in this category as well, too, for a combination of two plays that stick out, one across each game. One was the botched breakaway layup against Mount St. Mary's.
Holy shit, I want to talk about that. Man, that was a thunder touch off of the of the glass. He looked like he was just running full speed and just was like, I'm just going up and hammering that ball off the glass.
It looked like I was playing pickup basketball there. It was real rough. So that was one. And then the second one was the wide open look he had for three against UCLA, where he was thankful to get the rim. That barely got the rim. And those two together, I was like, okay. Like Chris Arch is working through a few feelings at the start of the year. This is not the guy we saw at the end of last year. So he's a close runner-up, but I think Caleb unfortunately gets the award this week.
I don't have it as that close. I'm not giving him the Pass the Fucking Ball. I think Caleb is a clear-cut winner.
Yikes.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, look, we're going to call a spade here on the full floor.
It's true.
All right. I think that's it for this part of the podcast.
Part one. Part two coming soon.
Part two coming in a second. So yeah, stick around. Part two is coming up. Just go to it. Episode 4, part 2, part B, whatever Brian's going to call it when he produces it. But stick around. We're going to do a couple different things, but mainly we're going to cover the preview for, well, Howard kind of, and then really more Tennessee and UNC or Purdue coming at the end of next week. So stick with us. Thanks for listening to part 1. And as always, let's go Nova.